Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. Today we will be going over a war dog, specifically one with a Khorne color scheme. Leave a comment, leave a like below. I hope you like the video and I will see you next time.
Alright, so here's all the parts we're going to be working with. My particular customer had everything magnetized, so we are going to be doing all the weapons, as well as the main body. So the first thing we're going to do is just prime everything. I'm a big fan of army color black, and then we're going to go in with a base coat of Leadbelcher. If you have Leadbelcher as like a primer, honestly just use that. I don't. But this entire thing really will be covered in a base coat of Leadbelcher, so I'd just go for it if I was you. And yeah. Okay, now with that done, we're going to be working on the red. I'm starting with Dark Reaper as my undercoat. The reason being for this, why I'm not just using like a true red, is because it gives you good undertones. If you do like a blue underneath a red contrast paint, you'll see when we're done this step what it will look like. It'll look very like muted, dirty, very dark, like a more of a complex color than a true red would give. So anyways, we're base coating here with Dark Reaper. And with that done, our next step is going to be kind of creating this, I don't know how you call it, spotlight effect. I'm going to be showing you two ways to do it. One without an airbrush and one with. I prefer airbrush because, God, it's so much easier. But if you don't have one, you can use a sponge. I just have a regular sponge here, but makeup sponges also work very well, like makeup eggs. You can find them at any drugstore, really. You don't have to spend a lot of money on them. But yes, we're going in with a 50-50 mixture, and we're just going to be putting this in the center of this, I guess you'd call it, what, a headpiece? We're not going to be really touching the sides of this. We want your eye to be drawn to the center. So the lighter colors and like the more concentrated lighter colors towards the center. With that done, we're going to be going in with Tyrant Skull. It is a dry paint, but you can water it down. It'll just be very thin. It'll act a little bit differently, but I'm using it dry anyways. Right, okay, now the next step we're going to be taking is dirtying up our metal a little bit, because I want to be putting on like all of my dirt and rust colors at the same time. So we're going to be going in with Agrax, Earthshade, and a bit of Coelia Greenshade, just to dull down this metal a bit and get some depth in the deeper parts. I'm pretty liberal. I'm not letting it really pool on flat surfaces, but I am in like the details. Then finally some Nuln oil as well on this metal. And I'm concentrating this less on the flat surfaces and more in the, I don't know, I guess the detailed surfaces. The ones with a lot of depth in them. And then a quick dry brush of Leadbelcher. After this step as well, you could leave it here. Like reasonably, you don't have to go any further with like the metal tones here. I do, because I like the way it looks. But after this dry brush step, I'm only dry brushing like the high points as well. I'm not really getting in there. I'm just going around like the edges and the high points of this piece. But yeah, like I said, you could leave it here if you'd like, but I like to go a little further. And now with Ironbreaker, I'm going to be going over just like some very specific points. How would I explain them? It's like eye-catching points. So around all these like more flat edges and any interesting shapes that pop out of the figure, I'm going to be putting it on as well. And it's just like a quick dry brush, just creating a little bit more depth. You see, I'm not too liberal. It really is just a light dry brush, mostly because we're going to be going over this as well, with some dirt. We're just creating a good base underneath that, so you don't really need to get too technical or too specific, unless you want to, of course, unless you don't want to do the next couple of steps and you want to leave it here, but... There we are, we got a nice clean boy. And now with our Necron compound and a much smaller dry brush, I'm just going to be hitting the very, very high points. So the parts of this piece that stick out the absolute most. It should be very minimal what I'm touching here. Not more than like 3 things on each side. But yeah. I'm hitting some of these like very edges too. And we're gonna come back to that later, but when you do like dirty up is how I would call it, mess up maybe, this kind of metal, it's the edges that tend to still be very like bright, because that's what gets damaged for the most part. Right, it's gonna be the edges. This is what rubs up against things. It's what gets, you know, stricken by other weapons, by swords, whatever it may be. I don't know. The edges tend to still be decently bright. Now we're gonna go in with Streaking Grime. Now this is an enamel paint. I used 2 of them. They're a great resource. This is the White Spirit. So we're gonna be putting down Streaking Grime. And then we're going to be going back over it with a White Spirit that's going to dissolve it. So it just creates, like, it looks like there's mud melting off this figure. I'm going to be going in very liberally with this as well. Pretty much everywhere. I mean, this thing, it's Khorne, it's disgusting. It's not like Nurgle rot. It's just gross, man. It's full of oil. It hasn't been cleaned in a century. So all this metal, really all of it, gets a good liberal coating of dirt. Okay, now that that's done with Berserker Bloodshade, we're going to be layering that on this headpiece. And we're going to be getting our red tone here. So with a couple of layers, you'll start to see how deep this red really is. And it would be harder to achieve, like, how would I put it? It would be harder to achieve the difference in tone between that center spotlight and the outer corners if I was just using a pure red. That's the logic behind, see, the edges are almost black because it is a base of blue and then there's red over top of that. Right, so I'm really filling in pigment, and it's turning black. Anyways, good contrast there. That's the reason why I did it. And now with our White Spirit, I'm going to be going around with a sponge. You could do this with a brush too. There's so much surface on this head. I used a sponge, but I'm going to be going in with a white spirit and just taking off a thin layer of the dirt I just put on. Now with Iron Hand Steel and a I'd say a damp dry brush. Not wet, but damp. I'm going to be going in some of these higher areas and creating like almost like battle damage. Not quite. We're going to be putting in actual battle damage later, but this is, it's not smooth enough to be a dry brush. You will see some brush strokes in what I'm doing. It's more like this is where the dirt has really been rubbed off. And then another enamel paint rust streaks. Now, I'm not going to be quite as liberal with this one. I'm going to be putting it in places I'd imagine rust would be. I don't know. Use your imagination. Or follow me, exactly. Yeah, it's just places I imagine rust to be coming out of. I'm less liberal with it. And then the same thing at the end of it. We're going to be going in with a white spirit to smooth out some of these lines, to melt it really into our figure. And now we're going to be kind of following the same dry brush steps that I mentioned beforehand. So starting with Leadbelcher, just generally on our higher areas, a very light, not liberal dry brush. And then with Ironbreaker, our more like attention-seeking points, not necessarily high, but just, you know, grabs your attention. Some of these circles, like around the edges there, those pipes. Perfect. And now with Khorne Red, he has some wires kind of sitting around here. In him, around him. So I use, yeah, Khorne Red just to do in those wires. And then with finally Stormhost Silver, we are going to be actively lining and doing some battle damage as well. So what that really is just in a few places, not too much, unless you want to. I mean, who cares? I just do some very skinny and straight lines along some of these larger, like, I guess, faceplates, and then around the edges. And now we're going to be doing the center. So there's a couple ways you could do this. The first one is Runelord Brass, which is what I went with the entirety, which is off to the right. Now in the center you can do copper. I experimented with. It's up to you. I like the brass. And then finally on the right you can just stay with silver. Or on the left, sorry, you could stay with silver. I thought that was a little too, I don't know, just didn't draw my eyes as much. So I went with bronze myself, but I feel like all three of these color combos go very well. Alrighty, and with that done in, everything, we're going to be doing some heat effects here, but reasonably, again, you could stop here if you'd like. But now we're going to be doing, because this is like an engine, right? That's kind of what I imagine it like. So there's going to be a few colors we're going to be using, but starting off with Corax White, really watered down. It's really a liquid, honestly. And we're going to be filling in a couple of these holes. Now, there's these holes here in like his, what are those called? Exhausts, maybe? There's these ones in the back here as well, which is what I start with here. There's ones to his side, and there's ones underneath, wherever you feel fit, really. Like, there's a couple I choose to ignore in this piece, just because I don't want to do too much myself, but any of these kind of vertical vents, I feel like reasonably you could say that they're heat vents, and you could apply this technique. I just chose to be a little less liberal with it, but it's up to you, honestly. Perfect. Now this is an example of what we'll get on like the less hot side of things. That's how I would put it. So anyways, we start with Corax White, which is what we just did. We filled that in. And then I use Phalanx Yellow. And then this particular technique, this is the one without the airbrush. I will show you without, and then I will show you with. With is obviously preferable to me because it's so much easier. But with a brush, all of these are very watered down, by the way. Borderline, like just straight liquid. With the yellow, we are going to be going around the white and filling in these holes as well. However, once you do fill them in, you'll blot them, so it's not entirely filled with yellow. You could, essentially the goal is to see a little bit of white in the center, but this yellow is pooling around just the corners. Alright, you can still see a good bit of white there, but there's a lot of yellow around the corners. And then with that yellow as well, I'm just going to be going around on the actual steel itself. Not just in those recesses, but yeah, on the steel as well. Here I am doing that. It's a little bit less liquidy than, or like watered down, I should say, sorry. It's a little bit less watered down than what I use for the recesses. But honestly, if you're patient, just want to do an extra 2-3 coats, doesn't matter. The next color I am going in with is my orange, which I'm using the Ryza Rust, which is a dry paint, but I watered it down. The thing with dry paints when they're watered down is just they're thin, they're not pigmented very well, but in this case that works in our favor. And then lastly, for our red, I chose Evil Sunz Scarlet around here. So you're just really creating like a gradient effect from white to red. And then I'm taking Leadbelcher, very watered down again, and I'm putting that not in the recesses, I made a mistake there, but on our flat surfaces. What that does when it's that watered down is it brings back that kind of metallic tone. It brings back that sheen, because we just use matte paints, right? So unless it's extremely hot, I don't know, there's a few occasions where I do, there's a few where I don't, but for the majority of the time I put a very thin layer of Leadbelcher back on top to bring back that metallic sheen. And then I'm going in with Stormhost Silver, just to line all of that again. Now I'm doing the same thing here, except now I am doing it with an airbrush. So much easier. So, Corax White, And I'm putting this everywhere where we're going to put paint, so I just need less layers, essentially. It's going to be brighter with an undercoat of white versus an undercoat of that Leadbelcher. Perfect. Now we're working in like backwards order. So instead of going white, yellow, orange, red, we're going red, orange, yellow, and then we're going to be putting our white back in there later. Here's that orange. The logic is really that the lighter color, so the white, is the absolute hottest point in whatever you're painting. So red, I mean, things get white hot, right? So red's going to be along the outer edges, and the next color you use, you're just going to be using it in a more concentrated area. So there's a nice blend up until white. Alright, and with that done, I'm going to be going back in with my Corax white super watered down and filling in these recesses again. And then with a coat of Ironbreaker, again, very, very watered down. I'm just bringing that metallic sheen back to this back end of this piece. And with Leadbelcher, what we're going to be doing here It's like a light dry brush around the edges. Just hitting the edges and these pipes here. You can also, at this point as well, go back in with, what did we use? Ironhand Steel or Stormhost Silver to create some of that battle damage that we were doing before on the top end of this piece if you'd like. Now would be the time to do it. I chose not to, but... Alrighty, now with some Runelord Brass, we're going to be doing this skull. So the bottom half is Runelord Brass, and kind of like in his eye socket as well. Now the reason why I prime black, even though the majority of this model is Leadbelcher, is because a lot of my clients come to me and they have pre-built like minis. So there's areas I can't reach very well. So like you saw there, I was kind of trying to stuff my brush into his mouth. But what's great about priming black is that when spray paint gets in there, and it is black, you don't really see that there's paint missing that far deep into a skull cavern. So that's why black is usually my go-to. The next step we're doing is over that Runelord Brass, some Skeleton Horde, just to dull it down a little bit. And then with Sycorax Bronze, a very light dry brush. Again, I wouldn't get too technical with this, because we're going to be dirtying it up like we were before with that silver. We're just creating a good, like, base for the dirt to lie on top of. So there's some depth when it does. Again, would be a good place to stop if you'd like, if you want it to be more of a clean model. But come on, it's Khorne. So we're going to be going in with rust streaks now to, again, create that dirt, mud effect. Lovely. And now with Canoptek Alloy, we'll be lining. So anywhere like around his teeth, his jaw, anywhere you want a little bit of like sheen, anything to pop. Again, my logic behind like these lines, where I'm doing them and why I'm doing them, is kind of like where would the dirt get rubbed off, right? Yeah, with some Khorne red. I mean, this one's just aesthetic. You can choose whatever you want. I felt like Khorne red was fitting for the Khorne war dog, but the wires around his skull. And now some Hashut copper. He has these two tubes hanging from the bottom of his chin. I'm just gonna give him a really light dry brush just on the bottom there. Some nice depth, really. Unnecessary step, but I think it looks pretty. Now with Evil Sunz Scarlet, I'm just going to be dotting his eyes. You can do his eyes any color you'd like. I'm keeping with the red scheme here, the evil scheme. Make sure my brush is wet, very pointy. I just finished cleaning it with a brush cleaner, which does keep your brushes like very nice. Keeps their bristles all in the place they need to be. And then I'm just dotting those little eyes there. Most stressful part of the piece, honestly. Okay, next is Screaming Skull for the top half of a skull. I kind of interpreted that like as actual bone, and I think it looks neat. And now with good old Skeleton Horde contrast, we're going to be applying that liberally. Okay, once that dries, we're going to be doing a dry brush of Ushabti? I don't know. Man, you tell me. Bone. And this is decently liberal around the skull, but just be careful not to fill in too many of the low points, because I feel like with how dirty the rest of this piece is, if we use too many light colors and we get rid of too much of that contrast on the skull, he'll look too clean. So finally with Tyrant Skull, we're just going to be hitting the high points. We're not hitting the whole skull with this. Just kind of his forehead, nose, a little bit of his teeth. And there she blows. Next up, shoulder pauldrons. Now, same steps as like the red and the silver on the main body. So we're going to be going in as blue, and then we're going to have that beige like center, all the same colors. I don't remember them off the top of my head, I'm sorry, but exact same techniques here. Here it is with that beige in the center. Once the contrast paint is on there. And then we go in with our streak and grime to make this thing look dirty and gross. Lovely, once that dries, Leadbelcher, and like the same series of events here. Once that's done, rust streaks all around the metal there. I'm applying all of this enamel paint. I'm applying very liberally. Because when you hit it with the white spirits, the first thing that's going to dissolve, like, very quickly is the thinnest points. Like, reasonably, you can rub this stuff right off your figure. So if there's thick globs that dry in various places, and are more caked on, really, more layers, it'll take the white spirits a minute to wash those away. Which it creates like more of a natural dirt layering effect. Lovely. Pauldrons are on. Now the top half of this guy is officially done. And we will move on to his legs. Again, I have a base coat of black going in there with Leadbelcher. Realistically, you could just base coat the whole thing of Leadbelcher, but I didn't have it. I like black for the crevices I can't reach anyways. Next up is Agrax. Same process, same step of events as the head. So Agrax, a little bit of Coelia, then some Nuln oil, and finally our Streak and Grime and our Rust. Here I am with Streak and Grime, putting that shit everywhere. The only thing I'm really missing is those little canisters on the back of the legs there, because we're going to be doing that same heat effect on those. They seem like they're kind of like exhausts or radiators maybe. So that's the only thing I'm not really touching, only because I'm going to be going over it later anyways with other paint. But everywhere else gets a good old coat. Here I am with white spirits, taking that off of some of the high points where it might have gotten rubbed off, and then with rust. And then he has these thigh pads as well as knee pads, or knee armor, I suppose. That definitely, they look like a good place to do this red technique we've been doing. So same step of events, with starting off with our blue, our sunspot of beige in the middle, and then sealing that all in with a contrast paint of red. Awesome. With that done, we got the grime like around the edges like we did before. Now with Iron Hand Steel, we gotta go in and we've gotta line the cajillion lines along these legs. This took me hours, man. But yeah, along all the edges that the dirt might have gotten rubbed off on, we're gonna do some fine line work here. Perfect. And with that done, our boy has legs. And you see in the back, wires, we're done with the Khorne red. His skulls that are on his little chainmail loincloth there, we're done with the same steps as his skull, as well as the little radiators he has in the back legs. Same steps as before. This video is already an hour long, just trying to save some time here. Alright, next up. We have this little chainsaw type thing. We're not doing or coating the whole thing in Leadbelcher, just kind of like the center areas here. I feel like copper, I'm gonna go in with like a copper tone on like the, what do I call those? Some of the accent metals, I suppose. So anyways, Leadbelcher on the majority, but just not on all of it. Avoid like the front part, kind of lining. There's a box at the end. You'll see what I paint copper in a second here. But the majority does get a Leadbelcher coat. Lovely. Now, Hashut copper. We're gonna be, it's like the linings here. The teeth, though, are still Leadbelcher. But he has, this chainsaw kind of has this decorative lining. All of that's gonna be copper. As well as that front big piece. Can y'all tell I'm a painter and I don't play the game? Tragedy, I know. Now, a Cygor brown, this is really watered down. What do I say it even is? Maybe like a 75-25? Or, 60-30? Well, 60-40? You'll see like the color it gives me on my skin here. And what it gives you on that copper. Yeah, honestly, I'd say it's, for every one brush full of Cygor brown, I have 3 full brushfuls of water in there. And we're building it small layer by layer, maybe 20 or 30 layers, honestly, just so it blends really nicely with the copper. To create this depth around some of the edges. Now, the only place that really matters where I'm putting it is this front blade and the box in the back. But you'll see with the lining, I kind of put it haphazardly. And the reason I did that is at that point it looks more like it's aging. It's dirty, it's dented, versus like at the front here on this, is it a ram, I suppose is what you'd call it? I don't know. There's actual, like, there's depth to this thing. There's certain areas that are recessed. There are certain that aren't. So I'm just following the logic behind what's already given to me. And then to reinforce some of these highlights, because I went over them quite a bit, I'm just going back in with a watered down Hashut copper. I don't know what I was doing here. Contemplating? No clue, Chief. Okay. Next is some Sycorax bronze. And I use this to line that, like, all these highlights as well. I'm not going as far as I was with the Hashut copper. I'm just kind of going along the center line. There's one more color we're going to be using to highlight. This is kind of like a middle tone. And then, just in between some of these Cygor spots, I had along the lining there. I'm not even going to try to pronounce this one. Nicola? I don't know. Bro, I'm going to be going around some very specific points. Now, this is where, like, the copper has oxidized and nothing has touched the oxidization for it to rub off. So right around, like, the bolts, as well as some of these recesses around, like, these circular parts here. Very specific places. Lovely, and Canoptek Alloy is going to be our last highlighting shade, so it's just a very, very thin line across some of these highlights, and then boxing out like you would in, we have been, with like the Iron Hand Steel and the Leadbelcher, just along all of our edges here. Okay, now we're gonna make the whole thing dirty. So streak and grime, we are going in liberally everywhere, over the copper that we just did. Everywhere, man, just make this thing dirty. Now with Iron Hand Steel, this is what we're going to be using to highlight some of this silver tones. So on these teeth, and then like around the edges of everything else, on your bolts and everything, everything's silver. Now, for example, like right there, that circle would be a good opportunity to do that heat effect again. I chose not to, but it's definitely a place for it if you want to. Alrighty, now, oh, this is fun. So blood for the blood god. I'm watering it down just a little, maybe 50-50. I'm taking a dry brush, and I'm soaking that shit in. And then I am flicking it all over the weapon. I'm concentrating it. Like right now I'm just doing the entire body, but I'm concentrating it as well, like at the tip where there would be some bludgeoning damage there, which is what I'm doing right there. And you can do this all over the figure. I just chose to do it on this weapon in particular. It's up to you. And then I'm not watering it down at all at this point. I'm just putting it right on those teeth. And there you go. All done. Next up is the hand. Now, I'm gonna be so for real with you, it wasn't worth filming. It was the same steps again. So yes, this plate right there, the inner like part of that is gonna be our red technique. The rest of it is Leadbelcher. Dirty that shit up, do some lining. Same steps we took before. Nothing special about this one. Okay, looking good so far. We just have 2 weapons left. Those are a little fancy, unfortunately. We're gonna start off with this, I guess like machine gun? I don't know, chief. Leadbelcher all over the majority of it. However, we're also going to be doing this muzzle burn technique. So these are the colors we're going to be using. Hashut Copper, Druchii Violet, Ultramarines Blue, this Queely green shade I have on the bottom in there, and Black Legion. Perfect. I also end up using as well, I don't show it here, but I do end up using Frostheart contrast just for the tip there as well. So I'll show you the heat chart. I do put it on screen eventually. I should have done it right at first, but what do you do? I'm going to be covering about half this, what is it, the muzzle, with Hashut Copper. It is a gradient we're doing, but it's not like an equal gradient where each color has a certain amount of space. By the tip of this gun, the amount of space that these colors have diminishes. It's about by half. So half of the muzzle is copper, half of the copper is Druchii Violet, half of the Druchii Violet is Ultramarine Blue, so on and so forth. Here's our green at this point. Now the reason why I'm angling the gun like I am is because I really only want almost the very tip of the muzzle here to be green, and then the light blue section's a bit larger. I finally put that heat chart on the screen there. And that light blue is just kind of like, you see at the very tip of the gun, there's like the individual barrels that show up, that come out. That's the part that's going to be that light blue. And there you go, there's our muzzle burn. Now I'm going to dry brush this muzzle with Leadbelcher, and then the rest of it I am going to line. And I don't know, why not? Man, there's a button there. Red button. Makes me want to push it. Why not? Okay. And finally, we have this little flamethrower. So, you guessed it, base coat Leadbelcher. Then with Mephiston red, there's like these tanks at the bottom. We're going to be painting those red. Don't worry, it's not going to be as bright because we're going to slather it in our dirt. But it's just like a different red tone than like the armor is what I was going for. Perf. And now just make that shit dirty. As per usual. I'm not airbrushing anything there. I'm just using the compressed air to dry it quicker. Okay, now with Berserker Bloodshade, we're gonna start our gradient. I go past the muzzle of this flamethrower a bit with it. Where is my flamethrower? There we go. I kind of go to where the tubes of those two tanks end up. Next up is my bright red Evil Sunz Scarlet color. Then our orange Ryza Rust. And I'm going in with Flash Gets Yellow here, because it's more of a fire and less, like, to me there's a difference between, like, just hot metal and actual fire. So I went with a brighter yellow here. Same thing, filling in these holes, these recesses, with a super watered down Corax white. Okay, the next thing I do here is once I filled in with a little bit of yellow like we have in the prior things, I'm actually going in with Berserker Bloodshade, watered down, just hitting the edges. So the center is more of a yellow, the edges are red, so it looks like it's on fire, or like there's at least fire sitting in the chamber a little bit. That's kind of the effect I was going for. I might have hit it, might have not, but I like the outcome anyways. And then we're lining the whole thing. And there you go. There's all of our weapons.